Thanks for staying with us right here on Sunrise as we continue this morning. Now, according to the National Youth Risk Behavior Survey, 17.6% of teenagers have considered attempting suicide, while 31.5% of teenagers' suicide attempts required treatment. As we look at Teen Suicide Prevention Week, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group is training teachers and parents on how to identify teens at risk. To talk more about the Teen Suicide Prevention Week, we are now joined by clinical psychologist Zamombele from the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. And on the line, we're joined by Trisha Davidson, who is an attempted suicide survivor. Remember, you can be part of our conversation by calling us on 011 447 1620. And we're also taking your comments on our Facebook as well as our Twitter pages. Good morning, Zaman. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. The importance of us observing this week and what our understanding of what this week is about, what should it be?
I mean, I think it's an incredibly important week, and if it were up to me, would have it for more than a week. And that's really just because any sort of preventative measure for suicide, particularly for teen and adolescent suicide, is incredibly important. Look, you've read out some really interesting statistics, and I must say they're very conservative. And really the only statistic that we should be concerned about is that one death, one teen death, one suicide is just too much.
It's too much, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're also going to be joined on the line by Trisha. Trisha, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Trisha. How are you this morning?
I'm fine, thanks, and you?
Okay, great stuff. So now, Trisha, this week, the significance of this week and talking about suicide prevention, as someone who is a survivor, how do you think this is important?
Pardon?
I'm saying as a suicide survivor, this Teenage Suicide Prevention Week, how important is this week according to your understanding?
I can't hear you properly.
Okay, well, let's try and sort that out, and we'll try and get her back on the line. Okay, so let's just talk in a setup. I know the focus this year is on teachers and parents.
Yes.
Maybe let's start at home. You know, a lot of parents feel overwhelmed generally when dealing with teenagers. And in 2017, there's even so much more that young people themselves are dealing with. What's really transpiring in the mind of a young person, or the life of a young person who comes to a level of point of saying, I want to take my life?
I think the average teenager and the adolescent age is already by itself a tumultuous time. I often quote Mark Twain when he says it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and it really is both at the very same time for teenagers. So kind of under normal circumstances, it's very difficult for any teenager to be navigating through this. And when they find it difficult to access the support of parents, it becomes even more difficult to make sense of what's going on for them, to also try and find any sort of parental person to help them navigate and negotiate what's happening. And I think that's occasionally what might be missing, is a relationship at home.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but in terms of like following just issues around mental health, really prevention for whatever challenges a teenager faces doesn't really happen when they're a teenager, is it?
Of course not.
Doesn't that start like, you know, when the child is, you can't start building a relationship with a child when they're a teenager. You should already be having that. Where's the missing link?
Well, I suppose there are two things. The first one is I completely agree. I think by the time that they get to that age and stage, there's certain coping mechanisms that to some extent should be in place. You know, a lot of teenagers at that point have a good sense of rationality and how to manage through things. Though more than that, and the second point is that I agree with you. I think there's certain things that cannot be avoided. And perhaps the trick there is to have a space and place where these things can be worked through. So the challenges, the impasses, the hurdles will almost invariably be there. I suppose what we're trying to encourage is the space and the relationship with a parent, a sibling, an aunt, where when these do come up, they can access them for some sort of guidance and support.
Okay, so the numbers are saying 9.5% of all unnatural teens in South Africa, you know, the deaths.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
So we're going to touch on what are the issues that the young people are struggling, the teenagers are struggling with. So let's try Trisha again on the line. Trisha, you're back with us. My first question to you was the significance of this prevention week for someone like yourself who is a suicide survivor. How do you think this week how important do you think this week is?
How what? I think it is.
How important is this prevention week for other teenagers? What do you think they'll learn out of this?
I think
Okay. The line is really bad. We're gonna have to leave it at that. If we'll keep trying if we do get it. Okay, so let's get back to that issue, Azamo, in terms of like what are some of the issues when you're dealing with parents or maybe from teachers or the teenagers themselves that they're struggling with?
I mean, I think there are very many issues, and we can perhaps look at one or two of them. And what's becoming an increasing trend is social or kind of bullying on social networks. And that can be as explicit and as overt as having an individual who attacks or gets at another teenager, to more insidious and implicit bullying about how good is, for example, your Instagram, or how good is your Facebook, and what are you doing there, etc., etc. So
it's peer pressure that used to happen on normal playground that's now on steroids because it's on a social media platform. So instead of a case of it was one-on-one with me and you and 5 other friends, now everybody gets to see it.
And it's also 500 other friends.
And
then there are other complexities, such as how many friends do you have, etc., etc. And I mean, the tricky thing with such media is that you end up meeting and inviting into your life individuals that you'd never really meet in real life or have access to, and that can obviously open up to very many difficulties, including bullying.
Okay, so your social skills, which are not really fully developed, are exposed at a level where you can't cope.
Exponentially too.
Okay.
So you don't, as you said, 5 friends. Now you have 500.
Okay. All right. So let's take a caller on the line. I think it is it Malcolm. Malcolm, thanks for holding your comment or question, and you're calling from Mpumalanga this morning. Malcolm?
Hi, Penny. How are you?
We're good, thanks, and you?
Good. It's Marcus. No?
Okay. Oh, Marcus. All right. Go ahead,
Yes,
Marcus.
Thank you, Penny. Penny, I think this is a good program, raising an awareness of teen suicide. But I think my contribution towards the topic is that we need to remind parents to spend much time with their kids, so that they can be able to identify when his or her kid or their kids are in a problem or they are facing a challenge that they cannot be able to deal with. Because we are living in the days whereby parents now are starting to be absent into their kids' lives. So it is very much important that this awareness should also, as it's going to go to parents as well, that we should continuously have some dialogues and discussions around parenting, because it seems that now kids are now dominating us in our houses. Instead of us dominating and making some contact and spending time with them, now they are the ones who are spending more time with their friends, more time outside our home boundaries. So my input, Penny, is that please, we are calling upon parents to spend much more time, because they will be able to detect if a daughter or his son has a problem. And again, we also want to call upon fathers as well. Fathers are now starting to be absent again into their sons' lives. So we also want to encourage fathers to also have relationship with their kids. And lastly, Penny, also pleading with parents that if they've got also parental matters or parental problems, they should not use these kids also as the weapon to fight their marital issues. Because they're kids, even if they are not with their mother, they're not with their father, they are still your kid, they are still your child.
Okay, all right. All right, Mark is making a very strong plea. Time spent with your children, because relationships really are developed and built over time. So is that one of the key factors? Okay, they spend a lot of time at school.
Yes.
So what are we picking up from that space?
I mean, I think that the school kind of hours are the most period that you can pick up when something is wrong, and hence this year in the prevention week we focused on teachers. How do we equip, how do we educate the educator to try and pick up when something is wrong, A, and B, what do you do then?
But she's dealing with 25 children.
Of course she is, and that is those are poor circumstances, and at the best of times that's what we have to work with. Really what we're asking for is to recognize that there's a difficulty, and not so much to burden overly the educator with trying to fix it. To a large extent, that's what we're here for.
Just wanted to bring in this point before we got to the news. There's a spike in substance abuse. I don't know, maybe we're just becoming aware. Is there a link, especially when it comes to young people, with substance abuse rising Because it also happens in schools.
There is, and I think that on the spectrum there are two sides. On the one hand, we do know that substance use and substance abuse does exacerbate the difficulties and the problems of suicide. It gets individuals into impulsive stages and places where they would attempt and they would do something that's not going to be helpful for them. So it does make it worse. And at the same time, on the other side of the spectrum, substance use and substance abuse, we also know, is also a symptom and an indication that something is already wrong.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it at that. Thanks very much for coming through.
Thank you.
And we're not going to even waste more time, as I'm, of course, talking to us there. Unfortunately, we couldn't talk to our survivor on the line, but we're going to go straight to the news. It's a week. Let's take it beyond the week.